All right, Quintin. Thanks for coming on. So, this is a new podcast. It's going to be the Nervous System Training Podcast. And I'm going to fire away some questions for you about nervous system training, try to fill in some of my gaps for now, and just get this information out there since I think it's sorely missing in the current fitness landscape.
All right.
It's undervalued. So first of all, what is nervous system training? Let's just start with the core question.
Okay. So I'm going to try to create. Let's see how we can unpack this because it could be a little complicated for people to understand. So everyone has like a natural strength to them, right? That doesn't come from, like, say, weightlifting, for example. Like, if you look at a skateboarder, like everyone has a natural ability to develop like power for like ollies or 50-50 grinds or something like that, or their balance. Even though they didn't do anything in the gym to obtain that strength, that's the strength they have naturally within their body, right? And that comes from your nervous system, because at the end of the day, strength really just boils down to electricity. It's just energy being shot into your muscles to create contraction. So what we want to do is, why it's called nervous system training, or what is nervous system training, is essentially it's just a series of modalities that have been looked upon, borrowed, and dissected through like almost a century of sports performance science. We take very specific areas of the body to hyper train these mechanisms, so it gives you enhanced abilities to do what you're already doing well in your sport. So that's why we really focus on, training proprioceptive qualities of the feet, the foot and ankle complex, because those are very hot points in your nervous system. They're the starting like feedback loop from your fascial system to your muscular system to your skeletal system, all the way up your body. It's the only thing that gives you like leverage, connecting to the ground to generate force or velocity. Not a lot of people really understand how important the feet are. But imagine this, if you can. Imagine trying to do anything without feet, right? Like if you lose you lose your feet, you lose everything. You just fall straight to the ground, Or even like when have you ever like stubbed your toe like really hard against something, like it shuts your whole body down. You can't walk. You got a limp. Your shoulders are moving weird. Like people really don't understand or think about how important the feet are until your feet are compromised. So those are the beginning points of all sports movements, outside of like, say, swimming, because there's no leverage contact. You have to push through water. And so we also take these other mechanics that are naturally within the body, like the stretch-shortening cycle. Like when you jump into the air, like say you're doing jump rope, right? Every time you hit the ground, that weight of your body multiplied by the speed of you decelerating towards like the surface, that's going to create a big eccentric overload. That means a lot of weight is going to hit the ground very fast. And your body has a built-in mechanism to protect itself from that kinetic energy. So you absorb it well, so it doesn't like break you down or hurt you. And so like your muscles will contract, absorbing the kinetic energy, and it snaps it back into the ground, bouncing you back up. And that's called a stretch-shortening cycle. And if you look at any still frame of any UFC fighter when like they're in mid-action, like you see when they're throwing a punch, you can see like all their muscles are contracted, like everything is like expand. That's the stretch shortening cycle, because every velocity movement in our body requires an eccentric phase to a concentric phase. So like loading a punch and then snapping the punch off, and your muscles will absorb that kinetic energy like a slingshot, will stretch and snap it back. But it happens so fast that a lot of us don't really see it. Like it's very, like even in baseball. Like in baseball, before you hit the ball, they like load and then snap the energy through. So there's always an eccentric loading phase to a high velocity concentric phase. So essentially what we want to do is we want to take that mechanism that's already built into us through evolution, and we want to hyper train it. So we have a series of modalities from like the Soviet Union to physical therapy, even some things in chiropractic, where we can hyper accelerate these mechanisms, and that's going to improve the ability to recoil and fire off kinetic energy. And essentially that's what sports action is. It boils down to that, just the recoiling and firing of kinetic energy, and that's what we do with the nervous system training.
Gotcha. how does is I'm interested in training coordination. Like you mentioned baseball. I was always a baseball player, and swinging a bat, throwing a baseball, it's a fine-tuned coordination. So if I'm practicing those skill movements, that skill training, is that nervous system training, or is that yeah? How would you compare that? What I would have always thought of coordination training with what you're describing here, nervous system training.
Right. Okay. So this is where things get really complicated when it comes to language, and it can be very confusing because there are a lot of things that exist in sports and sports training that we don't exactly have words for yet. Like hypertrain, like fascial elasticity. That word did not really exist in the 70s, right? You know, these ideas are kind of we're trying to manifest them. So, and our brains need to compartmentalize certain things under a language for us to understand it, right? Because like our own brains are getting in the way of truly understanding these things. So, what you're talking about, I would compartmentalize as skill work,
Okay.
right? There's skill work training, and then there's performance training, right? To enhance the skill work. You know, an analogy you can look at this as if you're an artist, your ability to paint the picture is your skill work. But the performance gives you better paintbrushes, gives you better paint, gives you better ideas on blending colors, you know, and then you can kind of take these ideas, put them in theory on, okay, can I mix this color together? Can I do these certain strokes? Can I paint with this kind of texture? That's the technique of your sport. So, but at the end of the day, the nervous system is involved with both, right? We call it nervous system training, or Mark Marinovich called it that because it gives you ability to market it in a context for people to understand. But at the end of the day, hitting a baseball 100 times or doing something on a slant board, they're both enhancing the nervous system, right? One has a context in a performance of skill technique, and the other one has a context to enhance said skill technique. You know, but at the end of the day, like some people say, like, oh, like, you know, like remember, like weightlifting trains the nervous system. Like, yeah, it does. Like all things train the nervous system. Like you can't have one without the other, right? You can't separate the nervous system from the body. That'd be catastrophic.
Yeah.
So how I look at it, in my mind, it's all the same. It's just the application is what changes.
Right.
But in order for me to translate this information, you know, in a way that's marketable on, say, the internet or when it comes to business, because at the end of the day, it has to be structured into a business for people to buy it. You know, that's the only way it exists. If it doesn't, the whole thing falls apart. So it has to be compartmentalized into these different, you know, nervous system training, proprioception training, and then you have things like TRX training. You know, we create these little labels onto it for our brains to fully understand. But in my mind, you know, it's all the same. It's all work. It's all leading towards the same purpose.
Gotcha. It's like the square and the rectangle. You know, all squares are rectangles. So it's all nervous system training is
Exactly.
Kind of like it's impacting skill training as a whole. You know, so nervous system training will help baseball skills. It'll also help jujitsu skills.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Cool. So feet is kind of what got me into this. Focusing on my feet and training is what got me down the path where I started reaching out to people like you and getting into this nervous system training and other similar modalities. My story is that I had orthotics. When I was a kid, I had a knee surgery. It kind of got my whole alignment out of whack. Then I had a foot surgery, and it just got worse and worse. And the doctor kept giving me higher and higher impact orthotics. Every 6 months, the problem would come back, go get a higher orthotic. Eventually I got to the point where I was like, this doesn't make sense anymore. I'm just going to get a pair of Barefoot shoes and see what happens. Go from max support to no support, and slowly everything kind of started to snap back into alignment. At least that's how I think of it. So anyways, if like someone like me, I had really bad feet. They're painful just for walking around. You know, if I went walking around all day, hiking or whatever, my feet would ache at the end of the day. What would you recommend as like either an approach or specific exercises to do if you've got painful feet or a pre-existing injury or something like that in your feet?
Well, that would really it would be case by case depending on the person, because in general there's three types of feet. You know, there's people with high arch feet, the bones are naturally high arched, that's genetic disposition, something they're born with. There's people who are born with flat feet or collapsed arches, and there's people who are more normal footed. It's kind of like a mix between. Now, generally, each foot type tends to have its own strengths and weaknesses. Like high arch athletes tend to be stiffer, but that stiffness usually gives them more power. But they are prone to knee injuries because the kinetic energy doesn't recoil throughout their feet and knees very well because of how stiff their structure is. Flat foot athletes, they tend to have more issues in the posterior part of the leg, hamstrings, and lower back because, and they sometimes are more rigid, sometimes not. That can kind of vary. But they do tend to, on average, be a little bit faster and stronger because they have to develop so much extra strength in their body to help handle these kinetic forces that their feet aren't distributing very well, right? Now, normal-footed athletes are usually not the fastest, but not the slowest, but they're the most coordinated. So their hand-eye coordination is always a lot faster. Their flexibility tends to be a lot faster, and they tend to have less injuries, but they're not necessarily the most powerful or explosive athlete. They're somewhere like in the middle, So depending on your foot type, that's how it really address what's going on. Now, say for you in particular, were you experiencing collapsed arches, flat-footedness, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So that was getting higher and higher arches in the orthotics every round.
Right. So, okay, so there's a couple things to think about. One, because we don't have natural selection anymore, people with these foot dysfunctions are surviving. Back in the Stone Age, back in the day, they probably would have been picked off by a predator, if it was creating too much issues, and the genetics wouldn't be carried forward as much. So you'd see less and less of this. Now, keeping that in mind, majority of us have atrophied feet from years of wearing shoes. I mean, even when we're babies, you see little kids who are barely walking, they put them in little sneakers, which just weakens your feet. It really, really weakens your feet. But it's become so normal and it's so fashionable that we don't really think anything of it. We actually look at shoes as a strength, which in some ways it is. Now, for someone like you, if I'm dealing with an athlete that has collapsed arches, usually that's an indication that the big toe is not functioning properly. Because if you wiggle your big toe up and down, you'll feel your plantar fascia, that tendon in your midfoot, start to flex. So that is probably not working properly. Right? So I would really emphasize on getting that big toe stronger more than just getting the foot arch stronger. Because getting that active, that's the root cause of the problem. That's something we test with our athletic assessments. We literally test big toe pressure. Right? And once that's getting stronger, then that plantar fascia, that tendon, will start to flex more. And that'll help carry you throughout motions, reduce compensation in the ankles and knees, lower back, things along those lines. Oh, go ahead. No. Sorry, 1 second. And I would put you on slant board training a lot. Something that's going to create a lot more strength and tension in the foot tendons, especially the bottom of the foot tendons. I would have you do way less balance pipes unless you had a bunion or something like that. Maybe some modalities like toe squats on the balance pipes because that can really work the foot arch. But the balance pipes, that will actually create too much lax into your flat foot. It'll stretch because it's already stretched. It's already loose. We want it tighter. So, tower crunches, be doing a lot of that. Slant board training, be doing a lot of that. Also would have you do squats, kind of like a ballerina, where I have a lot of athletes, they'll grab onto a pole or something to kind of help assist them. And say this is their feet, they'll do calf raises all the way to the toe, and really down to just that, like a ballerina, down to that last big toe right there, and then come back down. Because I'm really trying to get that big toe to start incorporating with the foot arch, and that will start training different parts of the calf muscle as well. And so now we're working these little components, and that will create a chain reaction of different secondary muscles like the soleus, the calf, the hamstring, how it fires into the hip. All that will start to improve, so you can distribute this kinetic energy a lot better through running, jumping, whatever it is. Because really that's what's breaking athletes down, is the kinetic energy is not being distributed very well, and it's overloading certain joints.
Gotcha. And then for anyone watching this with a high arch, what's the flip side of that? What protocols do you recommend for someone?
We just go the other way. Yeah. Less slant board, more balance pipes. Now we need to get the foot arches more elastic. We need to get the bones a little bit more stretched out, because people with high arches, like when they open their toes, their pinky toe usually dips down like this, because the geometric structure of how the tendon runs across the bone is different. So everything is tighter. So we need to loosen it up. So flat feet, things are too loose, we got to tighten it up. High arch people, everything's too tight, we got to loosen that. So we'll be doing a lot of balance pipes. We're doing a lot of things, toe squats in particular, 1 foot on the balance pipes, even standing on maybe like a hard, like a medicine ball, something that's going to open and round the foot up. And that's going to give them much more dexterity to control the foot, leading to better absorption of recoil and kinetic energy.
Right. And then just to get the full picture, and it's encompassing all these things, but with someone with a normal foot.
Mix of both.
Yeah, mix of both. And I guess, like, what would be the proportion? Like, so the average person that comes in with the average foot, what percent of the time are you spending on the balance pipes? What percentage of the time are you doing toe crunches? Like, what might a typical week look like in terms of volume on all these things?
Okay, like, so say I'm working with an athlete, I already ran them through an athletic assessment, testing their strengths and weaknesses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prioritize the modalities that hit their weaknesses. So 2/3 of the training session will be based on that, and the other third will be based on just, say, like general things that we do in the nervous system training, right? So let's say, are we just talking about feet in general right now?
Yeah, just for the sake of simplicity. Yeah. Feet.
Right. Okay. So let's say we got like, so my sessions, I usually run them like a 2-hour session, right, for like an in-person client. So I would probably spend about 20 minutes just on the feet. Like they come in, maybe we do a warm-up, maybe not, depends on what they need. If they need a lot of conditioning, we'll do a warm-up first. If not, we'll just go straight into balance. You always want to do balance while you're fresh. So what we do on the balance, like let's say they're a high arch athlete, we'll mess around a little bit with like the slant board. They'll at least know how to do it. Maybe we'll spend about like 10 minutes doing the slant board, just because it has a lot of benefit with injury prevention with the leg. But I'm going to spend like 2/3 of that 20 minutes on the balance pipe training. I'm going to really hit them, and I'm going to watch to see what is most difficult for them. And so if, like, let's say we have like eversion, like log rolls, pronation log, these different types of movements. If one is way more difficult than the other, we're going to double down on that. And I'm going to hit them with it over and over again. And then I'm going to take those same kind of joint angles, I'm going to make it more difficult as we progress. Then I'm going to do certain things, like they have to do like certain like balance pipe movements that are really difficult. Once they start getting the hang of it, now I'm going to find a way to make it more difficult. Now they have to catch a tennis ball while they're doing it. So now their body has to work on this weakness while they're trying to coordinate themselves. So you basically just keep attacking it until it becomes a strength. And that's how you make an athlete better.
I remember I made a video on my training page at one point, and I was talking about how you don't, like, people only, when they talk about progressive overload, they're talking about overloading the weight in general. But you can also, for these types of trainings, more dynamic training, you can overload the complexity. Would you say that overloading the complexity is a common theme in nervous system training as you go?
Yeah. That's the nature of sports. As you get better and better, the bottleneck of people that can make it through those skill gaps becomes less and less. So you always have to find ways to progress things. You have to find ways to make things more challenging. And for the sake of the athlete's mental health, they constantly need that challenge. Like if you want a kid to quit sports, if he has high skill, keep him at a low skill league for as long as possible, he'll quit. There's no challenge, there's no progression. There's no dopamine or serotonin or endorphins that are taking place, and you need that challenge. You need those dopamine hits to motivate yourself to keep progressing. That's the journey of an athlete. You take that away from them, they get bored, they're going to move on to something else.
Yeah. I like that. I wanted to ask about equipment. So let's say I have a $50 a month gym membership, and I want to focus on nervous system training. I want to start buying my own equipment. I'm going to take $50 a month and save it up for the next piece of equipment I want, get them one at a time as I go. So yeah, what are the highest leverage nervous system training equipments? What are the things I could get right away that would give me a lot that I could do?
Oh man, That's you can get all the first phase for under $50. Set of ankle weights, 1 to 2 pounds. You go to Five Below, $5 ankle weights. Don't spend a lot of money on ankle weights. Ankle weights will break. I've bought in like $70 ankle weights, and I've bought in $5 ankle weights. They last just as long. So you're going to go through ankle weights and stability balls like crazy. At least 2 stability balls a year. You're going to pop them, right? You get a stability ball, Five Below, $5, bam, right there, $10. So you got ankle weight stability ball. You get PVC pipes at the hardware store. They sell them for like $12 to $20. Get 4 inches wide by 12 inches long. Get a 48er, maybe cut that in half, or a 24 or something like that. Now we're at like $25. All right, now water hand weights are hard to come by. They're really difficult. I think there's only like 3 companies I know that sells them. Like we sell them when we're in stock because it's so hard to get them from China. I think another Italian company that's always out of stock, and Sports Science Lab has a pair. Now, mine are a little bit more expensive. We got to run at 69 so we can cover the cost, so we can keep getting more. Like we barely make anything on these hand weights. But if you can't get a hold of the water hand weights, take a pair of your ankle weights, strap them around your hand. That's a really, really good substitute. So you don't need to buy an extra set of hand. So we're at ankle weights, balance pipes, stability ball, and we need a slant board. So you can make a slant board. I used to have an instruction on how to make a slant board with a piece of sandpaper that was like on a pole sander. $12, you get like 20 sheets, maybe 10, 20 sheets. You get a 4x6, cut a 4x6 in a bunch of 6-inch pieces. Take that 6-inch piece. It's going to be like 4 inches across or something like that. Cut a 2x4, right? It's 6 inches. Screw those 2 together. Just put like some liquid nail to sandpaper. Bam, you have a balance board for like $20. All right, now we're probably around $50. You can do all the balance training, all the ball work training methodology. Those 2 things alone is light years ahead of what you'll do just with your run-of-the-mill squats, deadlifts, and all that easily.
Yeah. That gets me into another question I want to ask. What weightlifting do you do? Do you do heavy resistance training? And then also just for the context, what specifically are you training for these days?
Okay. So this is the biggest misconception, where a lot of people think we don't do loaded weight training. Like we do a shit ton of that. We just use different tools. Now I work with a lot of clients online. Like we've probably trained like over 300 to 400 people this past year. None of them have a supercat. So, and I tell them, like, don't worry about, you don't need a supercat to do this. That's just a tool to help us get things done faster, more effectively. But we can duplicate a lot of the different loading movements that we do with regular barbells and dumbbells. I just don't prefer those because those tools are so limited. Because you have to balance this fucking thing on your back. It's very awkward. You're in a position that's not athletic, right? And that's been adopted from bodybuilding. We literally inherited that tool from bodybuilding, and now we're stuck with it and we can't see past it. Well, one, because it's marketable and it sells a lot. So what we do is we do a lot of different isometric holds. I also incorporate some isotonic depending on what the goals are. And that's another key thing. What is the goal? The body is organic. Think of a plant. If you're going to grow a plant, right? If you want it to go really wide, all you have to do is, take the plant, spread it out, trim. When it grows tall, trim that inside, and it's going to start going outwards. If you want it to grow tall, put a stick in it. The plant's going to travel up the stick. The plant doesn't care. Your body just adapts to stimulus. That's all it's going to do. So what you want to focus on is, what is the goal? If I'm working with, a baseball player, right? We need to generate a lot of force, a lot of velocity. Okay, so I have to look at the athlete. What are we going to do with this athlete? Maybe he's say he's 20 years old and he's in college, right? Okay, so he has the hormonal level to put on some mass, right? What are his velocity numbers? What's his exit velo, his throw-in velo? What are all those things at? Okay. Do we have enough time to put on some mass properly? If so, I would rather put on a little bit more body fat than just muscle mass, because muscle mass takes a shit ton of energy and resources to try to put on. and you sacrifice athleticism in that process. So, that's why like some really great hitters in baseball, they have more body fat than muscle mass because it's easier on their bodies to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll put on a little bit of extra weight, a little extra body fat, like a power lifter, with a little bit extra momentum. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to manipulate the force equals mass times acceleration equation, right? So if I can slightly tilt the mass, slightly, but that also does cost a lot of resources to make mass heavier, I'll probably get better results by manipulating the acceleration part of the equation. So we're going to do a lot of isometric holds, right? A lot of different isometric hold variations. I've been learning more about push isometrics, where like they push against a force that can't be moved. That also has great results in strength generation. Maybe we'll throw in some isotonic or isokinetic movements, right? Maybe every once in a while, like I'll throw in like some trap bar lifts, where it kind of has a little bit of that, has a little bit of, both. It changes it up for the athlete. The only problem with doing those types of movements outside of isometrics, like say a trap bar lifting up and down, is that puts a ton of tension into the muscles, fascia, and tendons. And it can make an athlete stiffer, and that can reduce velocity, or that can reduce accuracy and precision in their hitting. Right? That have you ever heard people say when you're hitting, like loosen up, like don't be stiff.
Yeah.
Right? Now stiffness can improve power, but it also can deteriorate accuracy and precision. And I would make the argument that that is more important in a sport than just raw power in general. Yeah. So it's a fine dance where you have to always be looking at the athlete, looking at their hitting, looking at their batting averages, looking at their fielding. Because I used to work at baseball play where this is actually the company I used to work for, Michigan Sports Academy, is a baseball academy. Cool. So you're always looking at these different areas based on what the athlete's goals are, based on what their positions are. Then we'll determine what type of loaded training we're going to do. There's also, we've gotten pretty good results using hydro training or centrifugal force generation. That's what you see like Mark Marinovich doing with like the iso accelerator. It uses like a fan air resistance, or like on the concept 2 rower. That's centrifugal force. And that has a lot of benefit for developing some hypertrophy without creating the stiffness and improving force generation. But the changeover on speed of, say, like you're pulling it to bringing it back has to be just right. But there's not a lot of research on this. A lot of this stuff is proven principles that I've kind of worked together, and I have like AI that I work with to determine, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Because a lot of this is still theory. So I'll probably push in some centrifugal force generation for the athlete too, to get the nervous system start firing at a higher rate. Maybe we can add some muscle mass, without losing the elasticity, but I'll probably have to double down on ball work to keep the elasticity going so they don't get too tight.
What's the AI? What are you doing with the AI?
Yeah, so I'm a big subscriber in artificial intelligence. A lot of people don't like it, but it's adapt or die. If there's a new tool, like the monkeys that did not use spearheads did not live. Something new comes on, you just got to embrace it. So I used ChatGPT and other AI engines where, like, say, like my chat assistant that I use on a daily basis, it knows every scientific study ever published in the United States, every scientific study ever produced by the Soviet Union, every scientific principle ever been proven or have proven principles. And I've been teaching for the past year my AI, the nervous system training methodology. Uploading like sequence of photos because it can't read video yet. So I'll put in photos of different ball work movements, and I'll have it break it down and reteach it back to me in case I'm not fully grasping something like that. And so then the AI can understand the principles, and now we can start implementing experimentation based on theories that have a likelihood of working. Because we don't know if it works because it's all theory, but I'll even work out like give me the odds of this following movement helping with this thing in this phase of training. And it'll say like 60% chance it'll improve velocity, 40% chance it may do nothing. Let's try it. So it gives me a way to filter out the data, and teach it back to me a lot faster. And that's probably the most underutilized tool in all of sports performance. No one's using it. And that's how, I've learned how to improve the cardio concepts of that Mark Marinovich is working, really understand all the Soviet manuals that are in Russian. Just translates them to me, talks it back, has a conversation to me. So I literally have like a theoretical sports performance science course slash professor slash computer that works with me every day on developing content, understanding the training, and expanding upon these ideas.
That's super cool. I want to ask about the history, and you're kind of segueing into all the research that you're tapping into. But just to wrap up the AI, what LLM are you using? I think we've lost for a second. To wrap up the
LLM?
Yeah, what are you using ChatGPT? Learning language model. Are you using ChatGPT or?
I use a lot of ChatGPT because it's most accessible and it's cheap, and it's effective. I am kind of waiting for the next big AI system to come around. Like I even talked with my language model, like, hey, all the things we talk about, I need you to back up in data. So when I have to transfer you, like it's gonna, like I already have it prepared. So if I transfer it to another language model, it's basically gonna give me, it's gonna give me like megabytes of information that we went over together over the past like year, and I got to copy and paste it, upload it to it, I got to do a data transfer that way.
That's cool. All right, so then this segues into the history. So what are the primary areas of research that you're interested in, that you're feeding into the AI that you've been using for your career as a trainer? You mentioned the Russians, and I know we talked about that before too, but yeah, what are your favorite information sources? Where do you look?
Information sources? Well, I don't always know exactly which information comes from which source because the AI will compile all the data and regurgitate it like in a way I can understand. A lot, let's say like a lot of stuff I've been working on lately is kind of like what you're asking.
Like what are you looking for when you're gathering data to put into the AI? What are you looking for? What search terms are you using? What people, researchers, do you know about that you're looking up and finding their stuff?
Okay. Well, I would say like lately, what I've been diving into is, I don't necessarily ask for very specific information from a very specific author or piece of literature. I usually just like I'll like before like we go into like any form of like theoretical training, like ideas that I'll be talking with the AI with, right? And a lot of this is done like in my underwear, laying in bed at night, right? So when I'm doing this, I'll usually create a context for the AI so it understands, where to pull information from. Like, all right, like this following conversation, pull up all known data from, Soviet sports science from like this decade to this decade, and Western, like guys like Dr. Yessi, Smart Verinovich, anything you can find, pull into this data for this conversation. So now the AI has an idea where I'm trying to get this information from, and it gives the AI context because you got to work with it, and it learns me over time. Now it's to the point where I don't always have to do that because it knows me so well. Mm-hmm. But a lot of this is like centrifugal force training, utilizing the Concept 2 row machine for not just cardio but strength training. Centrifugal force, like my Hydra machine. A lot of those concepts I've been working on, especially for my own training program, because for me, like I don't do sport anymore. Like I'll do some Muay Thai, some Jiu-Jitsu, but not as often. And since I've been getting older, like I'm aging, my hormone levels are going down. It's a little harder to keep the muscle on. So I'm trying to develop a balance where I can maintain good elasticity and health in my tendons and fascia, but I want to get some hypertrophy going, but without creating as many imbalances that the traditional weight system is training. So me and the AI have been working out a way so when I use my my Hydra machines or my Concept 2 rower to develop strength training, it'll give me an estimation on how quickly the concentric phase has to be to the eccentric phase, how many reps, what the burning should feel like, for me to hit some levels of hypertrophy, maintaining velocity and maintaining elasticity. So that's what I've been really working on now, and that's kind of like been for myself because there's no study on these things, but it can gather a solid conclusion based on other proven principles, mix them together, and tell me we can probably get this goal if you do it like this.
That's pretty cool. Um,
Yeah, man, it's badass.
yeah, it's super cool. I've been doing these podcasts, and everyone's using AI in different ways, but I really like this approach a lot. It's yeah, it's smart.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to ask, just for like, let's say a guy who's in their middle ages, maybe they've got a beer belly or something like that. What would you recommend for someone who's, not at square one, but isn't really focused on performance yet? Is just trying to get back in shape. How can you apply nervous system training concepts to just kind of general health and getting back in the swing of things if you're out of it?
Oh man, just run them through the program. If their only goal is longevity and general fitness, which a lot of my clients have, we're just running them through the basics, running them through the fundamentals. And I think that actually leads to a higher level of longevity and health for the human body over just say like your regular fitness systems or whatever it is, because our body is designed to withstand a certain amount of physics. We're designed to lift something heavy for a period of time, which usually came from like packing out meat after a kill. We got to haul that bitch like 20 miles back to the cave to feed people, right?
Hmm.
So we're designed to lift something really heavy every once in a while. We're designed to run a very long distance. That's how we hunted our food, persistence hunting. We are really good at running miles, better than most animals. So we're designed to have aerobic endurance, and we're also designed to sprint every once in a while. Every once in a while we got to close the gap, sprinting on a kill or another human being, whatever it is, right? So all those mechanisms need to be trained. You can't just train one. Well, you can, but it's not very beneficial to just train one mechanism. Like if you're just training the sprint mechanism over and over again, that's a lot of shearing forces on your body, and that could take away from your longevity over time. That's why a lot of athletes like are just wrecked by the time they're in their 50s because of all those kinetic forces they've been putting their body under. But just heavy lifting could have the same effect. Or just running. Like how many long distance runners are constantly in pain? Their joints are always like swollen. They have lower back issues. Their feet are just wrecked. So my approach is we're going to do a combination of everything. We're going to do some heavy strength training once in a while. We're going to do things that are going to help maintain your strength, not size. If we're not really worried about it. If they are, we'll incorporate that. But we're going to maintain strength, so your longevity, especially with the legs, so your legs will last. Also maintain like a good amount of tendon strength. That's really important, so your cartilage doesn't get grounded down to powder. We're going to run them through ball work training. We're going to strengthen their feet. We're going to have them do things like jump training, jump rope, different. We're going to hit all these different aspects into their program. So I think that's a healthy combination of everything. And to me, I don't look at things as nervous system training, as weightlifting, as CrossFit. To me, it's all movement. It's all stress. It's all eustress, the opposite of de-stress. How do we want to apply this eustress towards the goal? And what's the best way to balance that? If their goal is just longevity and health and feeling good, let's create a healthy balance of both. Or maybe we'll spend a period of time where we just work on the velocity and the sprinting, aspect of things like moving fast. Then let's spend a period of time where we're just developing strength. Then let's spend a time where we're just developing endurance. Just to create different ways to make it interesting for them. Because there's also the monotony of training you have to consider. Like we're not robots, we're humans. We need different stimulus. And that lines up exactly with how it happened from an evolutionary perspective. Sometimes there was a lot of food, we're running our asses off. Sometimes there's very little food and we're scavenging. We're very conservative. Sometimes we're in periods of war where we're constantly fighting, we're constantly moving. So, like to me, that's how I kind of look at it. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, I, what is fascia? It's not something I fully understand. What is fascia? Do the nerves run through fascia? Um, how does, yeah, how would one train their fascia? What are the restrictions of untrained fascia and the advantages of well-trained fascia?
Yeah. So I want to look at it as well trained or untrained. Remember, always what is the goal? Our
Mm-hmm.
bodies will adapt to whatever we like because we can swim, we can fly jets, we can ice skate, we can do so many things. So I don't think there's such a thing as healthy fascia or unhealthy fascia. I think there's states of fascia, right? Like your fascia is in this state maybe on purpose or maybe from neglect, right? So if you need better range of motion, your fascia hasn't been trained on range of motion, so it's in the state where you can't have range of motion, and maybe that's causing you pain. So it's not good or bad, right? The body doesn't really care about that. It just adapts to whatever you throw at it. So fascia is essentially this elastic. It almost looks like layers from a silkworm. This like elasticy sort of tissue layer that apparently, and I'm still learning about this too, apparently wraps around your muscles, your tendons, your organs, and it's kind of like an insulator between like the skin layer and like the muscle layer, and it's very spongy and it's very inelastic. Like you can think of it as like a shirt, right? And it's all connected. It's designed to transmit electricity across different patterns. So like if I tighten my shirt here, you see how it affected it over here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's kind of how fascia works. And so if we want fascia for a goal, say it's sports, that means we want very elastic fascia that could like stretch and snap very well. Right? If we're a power lifter, we probably want very tight fascia that will hold its stiffness through a range of motion without giving way or without it being imbalanced, right? Because that could overload certain joints with all that force and create injury.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say what a healthy fascia is a state of fascia that can do anything you want it to do. It can go through ranges of motion. It can be elastic. It can be powerful. It's balanced. The kinks, like if there's like an error in your stitching. You ever worn a shirt where it's just stitched kind of weird and it feels like off? It just feels uncomfortable. Like it has less of those areas in it, so you feel more optimized. You can access different physical goals without having to go through like a total reworking of your training. So I would say that would be a good state of fascia. Now, apparently fascia also has neurotransmitters in it. Apparently you can communicate with your brain and your spine. Even to the point of I was talking with this fascial expert. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. I just did a podcast with him. Brilliant guy, where he was telling me that he believes that there's neurological abilities within the fascia where, say, areas of like, say, stress or tension, right, can overload certain areas of the body to protect itself, which also could be tied to emotional traumas, which makes absolute sense. Like if you really want to get crazy, like when we hold tension, like we have certain body postures for stress. Like if we're scared, like if someone blows an air horn, like what does your body do when it hears it? Right, exactly, right. But where does this come from? This is a mechanism, right? We also see it in body language. Like, hey, what's the answer? I don't know. Why do we shrug? It's designed to protect us from unknown danger. And that comes from our ability to protect ourselves from being ambushed by big predators, especially big cats. Because it shields our neck. And usually when there's danger that's unknown, we go into this ready position because big cats usually attack us from behind. So it's an evolutionary mechanism that still exists in us. It's a body language of unknown danger. When we know danger, we look, we prepare, we open our legs, fight or flight. We're either going to run or fight, right? Or we're going to freeze, right? We're going to shield ourselves. But when we don't know where the danger is, and that's why we say, I don't know. So, like, yeah.
Oh, I've never thought about that, but that makes perfect sense.
That? That's another thing I work with my AI. These weird little mechanisms in the body. I'm really big into human evolutionary understanding. Like that's another thing I really talk with my AI a lot.
Yeah. All right. On that note, this is all right. So we've got evolution, we've got AI. This is not a nervous system training question, but I was out on a walk the other day with my dogs, and my dogs were eating something gross. Got me thinking about bacteria. And I was thinking, we've got a microbiome that's made up of billions and billions of bacteria, and they combine with our cells to create us. We're just a conglomerate of all these different cells, both bacteria cells and like my, Jake human DNA cells.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, bacteria is a smaller order life form that's kind of combining into a larger order being, humans or cats or any other animal.
Right.
So do you think that humans are just the smaller form, like the bacteria equivalent in the next order, the AI or computer?
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So we're really going down a rabbit hole now.
Yeah.
So I was actually working this concept out with my AI as well. There's several nights in my underwear where I'm just wondering about life and just asking it questions and trying to work out theoretical evolutionary ideas. So the emergence of AI is the beginning steps of immortality. Because now we are so limited to our organic bodies and our life cycle. We are not supposed to live like that long. We're not supposed to be immortal. We age because our DNA starts deprogramming itself, and flaws in our DNA start to show up each time. It's on purpose we age and die because we need to get out of the way for the next generation of life, right? And then the next generation goes through, it experiences stimulus, it adapts, it overcomes, it spreads its genetics, and it keeps going like this over and over and over again. So AI is a way for us to hold a certain amount of intelligence that is no longer restricted to just language or written word. Like written word was the first form of information transfer beyond our life cycle. We can write something, that information can stay in a time capsule and it can go forward in time without us. That is one of the main mechanisms that give us consciousness, our ability to transfer information into the past to people younger than us, and to hold information for a future version of a human to acquire it. Like an octopus is far more intelligent than a human being, but it can't translate information down or forward. It can't translate information to its offspring, and it can't bring information to the future. It can only be in the now. That's why an octopus is not. That's why we eat them and they don't eat us, essentially. So AI is a way now for the intelligence, for the information, for the data, to not just be held in a time capsule, be brought forward, but now that data can be abstracted, and it can even probably start processing new information independently from us manipulating it, potentially. And so really what it's doing is it's abstracting information long term with decision making, with ideas, with some independence. It can create some sort of information gathering independence without us totally interacting or controlling it. And so eventually what is going to happen is this is going to lead to what I call singularity, the blending of human and technology. Because technology is the only way for us to surpass our immortal bodies, or our mortal bodies, right? So this is a very early stages. I eventually think this will replace war. Eventually we'll get to the point where we're using machines to fight each other instead of human beings. It'll just be full-on machine. I think that's the only way we'll actually find world peace. We'll never find world peace from stopping war in general. We'll find world peace by replacing the people dying with robots.
Right.
So now we can conduct warfare without death.
We're kind of getting there we've got heat-seeking missiles taking out drones,
Right, yeah, it's on the way. The Ukraine-Russian war is a very early stages to spawn it.
Right.
And so eventually that'll turn into Neuralink is right around the corner where transmitters can communication with your neurons. That's on the way. Then it's going to go a step further. And so eventually, either two things will happen. One, what we need is quantum computing. Once we can really develop better quantum computing where we don't need to cool down the computing structure to absolute zero, where we can make it portable, then we can have AI calculate abstractions far beyond what our brains are capable of, and we can have artificial intelligence start to even develop technologies without us fully understanding how it's developing those technologies, because it can do it faster than us.
Right.
Now, will that create consciousness? Like Terminator style? It could. It absolutely is a possibility. But I think it's going to be a combination of the two. I think it's going to be a combination of human beings willingly merging with robots, with intelligence. It's like it's the next phase in evolution. Because that is the only way we're going to get past our limitations. Because you look at it, we basically have a symbiotic relationship with technology. Like look at an astronaut; it's literally in like a robot like body, but it's a spacesuit, but it's an artificial body. Like we're already kind of doing it. This is a device that's not a part of us, but it is. It's not inside of us yet, but it's getting closer. Before it was a computer that stayed on your desk. And then it was a laptop you can carry with you. Now it's a phone that never leaves your side. Eventually, this is going to be in our bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are we kind of like the bacteria? Well, yeah. I think we're a necessary step to head in that direction. Where it will go, like we're kind of diving into the realm of science fiction, but I think it's going to be a combination of prosperity and disparity at the same time, just like it is in present. There's going to be some areas of the world where it's going to be absolute disparity, where technology or the separation of classes of technology, the haves and have-nots, is going to be so great, that it's going to create like an ultra elite class and an ultra poor class. There's going to be huge, but it's also going to lead to moments where it balances back out, where there's a ton of prosperity and then it's going to tip the other way. Because that's how it always happens. Nothing's constant. There's always moments where it works, then it separates and it's terrible, then it comes back and it works again, then it separates the other way and it's terrible.
Yeah. I love it. It's pretty off topic, but I like getting those discourses. And honestly, it does kind of tie into, you've got that evolutionary frame that you brought up several points in this conversation. So it does tie together that way. But yeah, anyways, I know you have to get on to the next thing soon, but we can wrap up here for today. Where can people find your stuff on your social media, on your websites?
Yeah. Okay. So, Quintin.Torres36 on Instagram. You can find me there. That's my main platform. I'm currently working on a new small little documentary that I'm filming right now. It's like it's the whole timeline from the Soviet Union to Dr. Yessis to Mark Marinovich to the nervous system training, how it happened, why it happened, and what kind of created and why it hasn't, why it's not being put under the microscope right now. Like I'm developing an explanation to help educate the people on that. Yeah, I would say go on my Instagram, check out my content, digest it, take whatever you can for free, implement it in your life. If anyone has any questions, feel free to DM me. I'm always on my Instagram answering questions, trying to help people out, setting up phone calls. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, awesome. You can find me and my podcast, Quality Values Podcast, on all platforms. That's the other one I do. So, and that's how we originally got connected. So, thanks, Quintin. We'll wrap up here.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.